Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And from the left, I'm David Jones.
This week on Red, White, and Blue, we have a very interesting program celebrating the spirit of independence, or maybe the spirit of dependence, with a discussion on the recent U.S. Supreme Court decisions on immigration and Obamacare. Joining us tonight are first Dr. Mark Jones of Rice University. He's chair of the Political Science Department, and he is a fellow in political science at the Baker Institute of Public Policy, and what else? That's it. Okay. Sylvia Garcia, who's president of the National Association of Latino elected and appointed officials, and Sylvia is a former Harris County commissioner. And finally, State Senator Dan Patrick of District 7. Dan, of course, is a leader and on the Health Committee of the Texas Senate. So, David, he'll have interesting insight.
And perhaps the next lieutenant governor, but we will delay discussions of that.
That could be an endorsement, Dan. I don't know.
So,
I don't know how much it will help, but I'll take whatever I can get.
Sylvia Garcia, you just are back from Orlando. I even saw you on C-SPAN hugging President Obama. You got to hear Obama, Romney, and Rubio. What was the reaction at the conference that you attended to those three presenters?
Well, first of all, it was a very historic event for us because it was the first time that we've had a sitting president come to the conference. It was the first time, too, that we're aware of where both presumptive nominees were at the same audience, not together, but at least back to back. And we also had, of course, Senator Marco Rubio, who is still considered one of the vice presidential potential nominees for Governor Romney. So it was a very exciting time for us, and I think that they were all well received. I think all of them tried their best to address the issues that really matter to the Latino community, which are, number one, the economy, just like all Americans, education, health care, and immigration and the breakup of families. So that was all on the topic.
So you're saying that Arizona and the ruling that was anticipated from the Supreme Court was not a matter of conversation at this conference?
Well, it was a matter of conversation, but it wasn't the top of the conversation. I mean, I think we're just like all Americans. The number one in everybody's mind right now is the economy. We were expecting the ruling. We didn't know when it was coming. Of course, it came on Monday. But I think all of the two candidates and the senator also addressed immigration. Now, the Romney campaign had issued a press release that they were going to come to the conference and make crystal clear, was the words they used, on what his position would be on immigration. And quite frankly, I was a little disappointed because, A, he really didn't address the DREAM Act. He didn't really address any specifics about immigration reform. So it was a little disappointed. Senator Rubio was more forthright and really talked about the issue, not only with regards to what the Republicans may do, but in fact just challenged everyone that in fact it is both parties. It is the Congress, it is the president, it's everybody not trying to find common ground to ensure that it's a sensible solution for everyone. So again, it was a topic, but it wasn't the number one topic.
Well, isn't it fair to say, Sylvia, that at least for President Obama, immigration has become an issue toward the point where he's running for re-election? First 2 years he was in office, Democrats dominated the House and the Senate, and of course they had the White House. They had the opportunity to make fundamental immigration reform, which I think everyone agrees we need, a top priority. He didn't do it. I mean, that's just a fact. So now we're in an election season. Now, all of a sudden, he passes an executive order that really, in my mind at least, should have gone to the Congress and is talking the good game, but we still don't know what, if anything, is going to happen, do we?
Well, first of all, it was not an executive order. It was an administrative policy change in deportation policy by the Department of Homeland Security. So it's not an executive order. Secondly, yes, the president had been in office. Yes, the Congress was there that could have helped him the first year. But the reality is he's got to work with the House and the Senate both, and he doesn't have the votes to get it done. He's been put in positions forward. Some of the senators that were with us in the last immigration reform bill that was before Congress, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, some of those senators have shifted. Senator McCain, who was for immigration reform, was part of the group that tried to put it together 5 or 6 years ago, is no longer with us. So I think the dynamics have changed, and things are just so partisan in Congress right now that I'm not sure that too much of anything can get done, much less immigration reform.
Senator Patrick and then Mark Jones, do you expect that the part of Arizona that was actually upheld, which allows for some people think racial profiling to occur is going to be a rallying cry used by the Democrats to turn out Hispanic voters in November?
I surely can't predict what the Democrats are going to do.
Wouldn't you do that if that was
when I
your
look at this
issue?
legislation, what is most disappointing to me, again, the Supreme Court decision taking away the rights from the states and governors to defend their citizens and their borders if they're a border state. And secondly, even in the area where the Supreme Court upheld the Arizona law, Obama immediately turns around and says, if you make calls into the Justice Department, we're not going to take the calls. We're not going to take these calls. And then he dismantled totally the 287G program, which has been a good program, I think Sylvia would agree with, between the federal and local governments. Once you have someone in custody to find out if they are here illegally. So I find, and I know we're going to talk about health care later in the show, but I just find this president, he sees himself more as someone who doesn't need approval of Congress to do anything or approval of the Constitution to do anything. And that will cost him in November big time.
What about it, Mr. Jones?
Well, I think the president, with the recent quasi-DREAM Act, is trying to make amends with the Hispanic community. Clearly, he had the political capital at the start of his administration to enact comprehensive immigration reform, but chose to concentrate on health care. As a result, once he lost his majority in the House, it became impossible. Now he's trying to do the best he can with the tools he has, which are using the powers of the executive office. It's going to be a rallying cry, I think, for Hispanics in many states where the police engage in racial profiling, Arizona being an example, and that will be used in places like Nevada and Colorado to try to mobilize Hispanic turnout, making the case that there's a sharp distinction between President Obama and what he's trying to do and Mitt Romney, who's linked to the attrition through enforcement policies. Whether it'll have an impact, I think, as Sylvia mentioned, Hispanics care mostly about the economy. That is, so immigration is of importance to a small fraction. But in states like Virginia, Colorado, and Nevada, they're going to be very close. That small group could spell the difference between former years of President Obama or a Romney presidency.
There's one other thing that we don't talk about, that nobody talks about, is that the Obama administration has been the most aggressive deportation of people in the country illegally of any administration in history.
Until now.
Right. They're like number one. They're bringing people out left and right.
Gary, if you look at the number of the dollars and the number of border agents that have been hired and have been put on the border, I mean, this president has done more of that, again, than previous presidents. And, David, I think you're right. This will be a rallying cry for many. The enthusiasm boost that the president got, I mean, polls indicate Latinos probably as much as 50% up in support of the president, and people more interested in the election itself. When so many people were like, oh, no one's doing anything for us, now people have noticed. I think you combine that with knowing that the piece that was probably the most offensive, the show me your papers, the police action stop, I think that stain makes it even more of a rallying cry now, because that's just one that was the most controversial.
So Mark Rubio actually would cure the Romney problem, would he not? I mean, and I heard his speech. He was excellent. That guy is good on the stump.
He's a very good speaker. And more importantly, he did not use a teleprompter, and I saw very, very few, if any, notes in front of him. He is just a good speaker.
He's excellent.
But he, too, did not fully address all of the issues.
Would he cure? Well, the question is,
Jones
and Patrick, would he cure the Hispanic problem that Mitt Romney, that
Sylvia
is saying Mitt Romney has?
It would help him a hell of a lot, I think.
It would help him a lot. Marco is one of the brightest, I agree with Sylvia, one of the brightest people I've met. I met him several years ago when he was still the Speaker of the House in Florida. We were talking about property taxes at the time, and he knows the issues. He's what I call an efficient speaker. He makes a point in very few words. It's very clear, you know, what he says when he's completed his presentation. I think Romney would make a huge mistake by not having Rubio on the ticket. I think Rubio would allow, particularly with the health care decision today, Romney could focus on health care and let Rubio carry the water on immigration. And as Gary said, I agree. We all agree we need comprehensive reform for immigration so that people can come here legally without trying to sneak across the border, die in the back of an 18-wheeler, be raped if they're a young woman just to get here. No one, Latino, Anglo, Black, should support that type of policy. But at the same time, we cannot afford to educate, medicate, and incarcerate everyone who just wants to come here. And I'm talking about the incarcerating those who come here are criminals, and those who come here across the border. Now that he's given amnesty, in essence, to children brought here.
There's
that A word.
But it is. It's saying you can stay
not.
here. Someone had, look, here's the bottom line. Everybody gets it. Everyone's understanding. Everyone's sympathetic. But someone has to pay for it. Someone has to pay for all the students in our schools, all the people in our emergency rooms, all the people who are on all the government programs that we have. Someone has to pay for it. And to me, Obama has now, even though he's deported a lot of people, has now just let down the gate and said, come on in, because if you can get here, your kids can stay forever,
Senator,
and probably you can stay here.
It's just patently not true.
It
It's
is
not amnesty, and it's not opening up a gate.
What do you call it when you allow?
It is for a very narrow group of people called children who, through no fault of their own, are in this country.
Sylvia, I get that. I understand it.
But you just said the opposite,
Okay,
Senator.
but wait a minute.
You said the opposite.
Let me ask you a question. If you're a child and you were brought here through no fault of your own, I get that, I understand that, and I'm sympathetic to that issue. He has now said you can stay forever, right?
No, he is not.
You can stay for a very short period of time.
Short period of time till you finish college or you finish your military service. I think it's only till you're 20.
Well, no,
and then you can
it's a short period of time.
So you can stay.
But it doesn't even guarantee that you get in the queue for full citizenship.
Go ahead, Dr. Jones. Your turn.
It's not retroactive either.
No, it's
that
not.
is, it only applies to people who are already here, who are under 31.
Millions.
Well, it's not. No, it's not a
And
million.
millions more who are coming.
Right. I guess it's fair to say that this is not comprehensive immigration reform.
No, it's not.
This is just a sop. It's done.
Most people
you
call
could say
it Dream Light. It's the Dream Act Light.
But Sylvia, you
Because
say
it's not
he's
even
doing it
direct-
because it's the right thing to do, and Senator Patrick, and I agree with
Well,
Senator
of course
Patrick.
it's the right
just
thing to do.
politics.
It's just
but
politics.
I want to shift to health care. Okay, Supreme Court came out with a decision this week. And they basically upheld Obamacare, and of course it's no longer a mandate; it's a tax, and so that's why it's legal. Political impact on Texas. First,
I think the
Dr.
biggest
Jones.
impact on Texas is we have approximately 650,000 people who are eligible for Medicaid, but presently aren't enrolled, but who under the new penalty, the new tax that they'll have to pay if they're not enrolled, will enroll, and we're going to have to pay approximately half of that. We also, assuming we sign on to the federal expansion, which the Supreme Court has said we don't have to do, and there won't be a penalty, that will increase spending as well. So what Governor Perry and the Senate and the House are going to have to deal with during the next budget is how do we pay for that expansion of Medicaid? Do we increase taxes or do we cut spending to public schools? Those are going to be our two choices. We're not going to have any other options.
Yeah, the health care portion of our budget is the fastest growing in our budget. It's $55 billion over the biennial. All funds, state and federal, about $22 billion is general revenue state funds. It's about, Medicaid is about 25% of our budget, and we're going to add these people now. What Dr. Jones just said is an important point. The Supreme Court basically said in a 7-2 decision this week that states, in essence, can opt out, because if we don't do it, they can't withhold our other Medicaid funds. So if the state decides not to spend the money, who's going to cover those people? Well, the federal government's going to have to cover those people. It's going to be very expensive, and Congress is going to have to deal with that issue. Again, it comes down to what can we pay for. Just for people who don't know, if you don't have health insurance in 2014, it will cost you 1% of your income. So if you make $50,000 a year, it's going to be $500 that you pay to the IRS. You won't be dealing with any health insurance company. In 2014, it's 1% or $95 of your income, whichever is greater. In 2015, it jumps to 2%. In 2016, it jumps to 2.5% or $695. So people are being taxed, although Obama is on the record on many interviews saying this was not a tax. This is going to be a huge campaign issue. It is a tax. People don't like this. They don't like the government interference. Once again, it goes back to Obama doesn't think he has to follow Congress or the will of the people.
Well, it seems to me like the will of the people decided that this was the law of the land. You know, after all,
No,
I mean, it passed Congress. That makes it the law.
That wasn't the
by one
passed.
vote.
a handful.
Let's forget what the positives are. I mean, this means that your insurance company, if you have insurance, can't hold a pre-existing condition against you. They will have to enroll you. It does mean that if you have insurance and you want to keep your child on the insurance with you till the child is 26, they can. It does mean that we'll have more coverage. I mean, this state has the worst record of all in terms of how many people are in
So how
insurance.
are you going to pay for it all, Sylvia?
It's
not a free lunch.
Right.
Well,
How do you
that's
pay
what
for
the
it?
good senator and others will have to
No.
ponder.
No.
But
No,
the reality
no,
is,
time out.
that we either do something about preventive care, which will be available under this plan up front, or we're going to pay for it in the emergency rooms, in the trauma centers, in the back end. So we're paid for it. It may just be a reshuffling of the dollars. It may be a restructuring. It may be a restructuring of some of our spending. It may mean cutting somewhere else to find here.
Where else?
Well, I'm not here to tell you that today. Okay?
Education and healthcare, Sylvia. Education and healthcare are 80%
the state will
of our
have
budget.
to figure it out. But
80%
the
of our
bottom
budget.
line is that for people who do get insurance or could get it through the exchanges, we'll have a better opportunity. And I think in the long run, you may see a change in the cost of insurance, which is what everybody wants, is affordable health care
You mean an increase.
insurance.
You don't mean a change. It's not going to go down.
No, I hope it goes down.
No, it's not. Look, the insurance companies, the doctors, all of the costs are going to go up. The lines are going to get longer. Look, we could have done those things that are the good parts. There are some good parts of the bill. For example, letting people stay until they're 26. It's not a big deal. That we could have done a lot of these things without having the IRS get in the middle of you and your health care. The IRS is going to come in with an agent if you don't have health insurance in 2014, 15, or 16, and you're going to have to deal with the IRS with a penalty.
Dr. Jones,
percentage of your income.
I'm just wondering if you're at all seeing it as ironic that this Republican plan of 1989 is now the law of the land.
Please.
This is the Heritage Foundation's plan
more importantly, it was
used in
Romney Care that
1989.
started
Tell us
in-
about the
in
bragging rights.
Massachusetts.
Tell us about the bragging rights
Sounds
that
like
you
politics
think
is
the
involved.
Democrats have by having passed this legislation.
Well, this was clearly President Obama's signature legislation of this term. He put all of his political capital, or a big portion of it, behind it, and it passed, and it's been pretty much upheld. I think one thing to note, though, is where this legislation differs from a lot of landmark legislation, such as 1935 Social Security or 1965 Medicare, is it was passed with a single-colored, single-party majority against the unified opposition of the other party, which wasn't the case with Social Security or Medicare, and therefore it's likely to be a subject of debate going to 2013, 14, and 15. The advantage the president has, though, now is that this is the status quo, and it will be incumbent upon Republicans, if they want to overturn it, to have the majority in the House, which they should have control of the presidency, which is up in the air, and have 58, 59, or 60 seats in the Senate, which is difficult. But right now, this is going to be the law of the land, and it's a pretty dramatic social policy change for the United States.
What's the earliest time that they could actually have 58 votes in the Senate? They can't reach it this time.
No, not this cycle. We're probably still at least 2 or 3 cycles down the road.
Except you're presupposing no Democrats would vote to get rid of it. They might.
Joe Manchin maybe, but I don't see any others
Well,
right
I know
now.
the House will vote on it soon after,
Next-
when they come back from
The 9th
4th
of
of
July.
July.
Yeah,
the 4th
will
of July.
pass
So
the
it'll
House.
pass,
Yeah.
but I think there'll be
Well,
problems
the
in the
repeal will
Senate.
pass.
Yeah.
And you're right, I think, Gary, I think it'll be interesting to see how many senators are on the ballot in, sort of swing states or states that are facing some changes, how many are going to be willing to stick with the Democrats. And I think the president will have that challenge in terms of keeping the votes together.
This is a major move down the road of socialism in this country that we are seeing cratering in Europe. The bottom line is, some people, look, we're all compassionate, we all want to help people, and I've always been a believer. We have plenty of money in this country to help people in need. The problem is this administration wants to give everything to everyone, whether you need it or not. And that's what's happened in Europe. Europe is going bankrupt. We will go bankrupt. I'm telling you today that if states have to pick up millions of people who right now don't have insurance, obviously don't care. I mean, some people do want insurance, and we could take care of those in need who want it, but a lot of people don't. We're going to have to cover them whether they want it or not. Someone has to pay the bill. And the people watching who work for a living, who play by the rules, who do everything right, you're going to pick up the tab. And it's going to be a much larger tab than we've ever had before. And again, Sylvia, we spend about 55% of our total state budget on education, about 31% on health care. That's over 80%. There are no other places to cut. So what I see this by the Obama administration is this is not about health care. This is about a redistribution of wealth to move money from from certain people to other people. And when he says, I'm never going to increase taxes on the middle class, this is going to be a huge tax on the middle class. I already gave the numbers earlier. And it's going to be a huge tax because states, as you said, the senator's going to have to figure out how to pay for it. Exactly. That's the thinking of Washington. We're going to pass these laws and let someone figure out how to pay for it.
So, Dr. Jones,
and those are going to be the middle class folks.
Senator Patrick was right. He said we're a wealthy country. We can do these things.
We can do
We're
things
also
right.
a wealthy state. So, can you tell us how it is that Texas maybe should be brought up to speed in terms of how we fund the types of programs that people need that keep people healthier, to keep them from dying younger than as is happening now? Where do we find the money in Texas? You might want to tell Senator Patrick whether we're wealthy enough to take care of this.
Wealthy enough. The question is whether people want to pay for it via increase in taxes. Because the only way to really pay for these services is to increase taxes. Now, that could be an income tax, that could be an increase in the sales tax, that could be an increased business tax. But the only way that we're going to pay for these increases in health coverage, as well as without cutting public education or the remaining very bare-bones state services that are provided, is through a tax increase.
Yeah. Well, I would disagree that we have bare-bones state services, and I disagree with all the accounting of this state does this. Look, we're the most prosperous state. We have for a big state, the lowest unemployment. We have a great economic engine, and we do that because we have been efficient in government. Conservatives have proven in the last budget we cut $15 billion without raising taxes. We didn't throw 100,000 teachers out of the classrooms. We didn't throw people out of nursing homes. We covered public safety. We added more money to the border. This whole notion of the only way that you can improve something is by spending more money is what has the world in trouble. You can be more. Look, when I say we're wealthy enough, there are 4 groups of people who need help. And that's children of all ages, because you can't hold a child responsible if they have an irresponsible or an idiotic parent, and some do. So take care of children in need.
Which is the DREAM Act takes care of that.
In need, okay? Number 2, take care of our veterans when they come home who are mentally and physically wounded. In need. Take care of seniors that have no safety net. In need. And take care of the disabled. If you're not in need as a child, a veteran, a senior or disabled person, then get off your butt, stay in school, get an education, get a job, and don't expect everyone else to pick up the tab for your lifestyle. And that's where we are today. Everybody wants to be on someone else's tab.
The 4 categories you mentioned are the uninsured. I mean, they are the people who need the help.
And Sylvia,
and we're not talking about anybody else. And we do, as a state, have the worst record in the uninsured. We have the worst record in immunization of children. We have the worst record of feeding children. We have one of the worst records with food stamps. You've got to take care of people. You can't ignore them.
We do take care of people, Sylvia, and we have so many people who are taking from the government who aren't in need. That
That's just
in
not
my
true,
view,
Senator.
No, it is true.
It's not true.
It is
There
absolutely
we can agree to disagree on that.
Dr. Jones, how many people at $8 an hour aren't in need?
I'm
sorry. Well, how many people at $8 an hour are not in need, which is part of the wage structure of this state is low wage.
That's a normative. For some people, they're in need. For other people, they're not in need. So it's a normative debate. It's going to be tough.
All right, so let's circle back to politics.
Yeah.
Okay, nationally.
Really, politics?
You mentioned some of that. We talked about the impact of Obama's whatever on immigration and how it could impact some states. But what about Obamacare and the Supreme Court decision? Is that going to impact the election? And if so, how?
Well, Romney added $1 million over the internet without asking in the first 4 hours after the decision was made. I thought it was real interesting. When he came out to speak, there was a sign on his podium that said, replace and repeal Obamacare. So they were ready for either decision. And will it impact the election? The question was, could Romney rally conservatives? And now the conservatives, the same people who turned out in 2010 that gave the Republicans overwhelming victories, they're going to be back. And of course you have the immigration debate. As Sylvia said, are more Latinos going to turn out to vote? But at the end of the day, it is how do people feel about their future in this country? How do they feel about their job? The job numbers are not good. The market's going down. I don't think people have a sense the country's turning around. And so I believe that this will just help Romney achieve victory. But I don't think it's going to be easy. But I think we'll look back on this day when Romney wins and say, this was the day that got everyone engaged behind him, that maybe weren't as enthusiastic.
The base coalesces.
Dr. Jones, he's behind.
Well,
Romney's behind.
I think this is something that will help with a fraction of the base, but I think the senator mentions the economy, and in the end, that's going to be the fundamental thing that decides the election. If the economy is getting better, if people are optimistic about the future, then President Obama is likely to be re-elected. If, on the other hand, the economy is turning south, things look stagnant, people are pessimistic, then Mitt Romney will probably be the next president of the United States. At the margin, immigration and healthcare will influence mobilization, probably more than changing people's minds, but the economy will be probably what decides the election overall.
Okay, so it's the economy stupid, right? So
I think the average voter does vote their pocketbook. I mean,
Right.
that's the bottom line. I remember one of my campaigns that said protecting your pocketbook when I was city controller. It is about the pocketbook, but I do think some of the things the president has done, particularly we haven't even talked about him having the guts to finally find Osama bin Laden, taking care of that for us. We do feel safer.
Excuse me. The Navy SEALs had the guts. Excuse me.
Well,
the Navy
but
SEAL,
who was the commander-in-chief?
Well, and,
let's not
as
forget
if,
that. No, let's not forget
as
that.
if George Bush wouldn't have done it had they found him then, or if Mitt Romney. Look, you can give
But
Obama a lot of credit.
He made
Don't
a tough
give him
decision to move forward.
Well, he
and
should have
we
been
did.
impeached if he had Osama bin Laden in
But
his
the
sight.
bottom
Sylvia,
line is
you and
they
I
do-
both, you
they
and I
do
both know
vote.
that you and I, being in a red state, we're out of it. Nobody's going to send us any mail. We're not going to
We're
see any
not gonna hear the
commercials.
TV ads.
It's over for us.
But I do
Senator
think it's,
Patrick,
the bottom
Sylvia
line is still
Garcia,
gonna be the pocketbook.
Mark Jones. Thank you all for being here. It was a great
Obama
discussion.
gets credit for Osama bin Laden. Please.
He is
And
the
of
president.
course, we invite you to visit our home online at
commander-in-chief.
HoustonPBS.org. Sylvia, thanks very much.
The show's continuing. whether you
Click
guys
on the local program bar, red, white, and blue. Read about the guests, watch the shows, a follow-up discussion, and until next time, get informed and get active.